now 7 a.m. and you're listening to Love 101 FM, the family station. Today, the Morning Watch is sponsored by the Accelerate Pastors and Leaders Conference, Thursday and Friday, October 3 and 4, 2024, at the Transformed Life Church, Hagley Park Road, that is 61 Hagley Park Road. And yeah, they're the kind sponsors for today's show.
It's the third staging of Accelerate Pastors and Leaders Conference, October 3 and 4. Hosts Pastors Dwight and Joan Fletcher, founding pastors of Transformed Life Church, Reverend Dr. Conway Edwards, also Dr. Rowan Paul Earl, Reverend Che Coleman, needs of the communities we serve. Visit Accelerate Leader 3710983, Accelerate Pastors and Leaders Conference.
Advised that the views and opinions expressed in this program are not necessarily those of Love 101 FM.
Hello and welcome to the Morning Watch on Love 101 FM. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. A special welcome to our listeners on love101.org. And if you are overseas and on the move, U.S. listeners can access us at 712-832-8001. And if you are in the UK, 0330-332-6541, or join us via the Love 101 FM app that can be downloaded from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. You can also join us on Love 101 FM Facebook and YouTube Live in the First Watch, United Nations Cybercrime Treaty, and in the Second Watch, Wars and Rumors of Wars. For our social media question, we ask, when and how will wars cease? Share your responses on our Facebook or YouTube, Love 101 FM Jamaica Live, and also WhatsApp comments and voice notes to 876-9973-125 using the hashtag The Morning Watch. We'll share your comments later on the program, but first, here's our quote.
All right, today's I quote says, praise to God comes naturally when you count your blessings. Again, it says, praise to God comes naturally when you count your blessings.
And Jukal, this is your I quote?
I mean, they kind of put my name at this point. But it's very true, very, very true.
Really, really interesting and very, I would say, praiseworthy I quote.
Definitely, definitely.
The Main Watch, we'll be back after this break.
It's the third staging of Accelerate Pastors and Leaders Conference, October 3 and 4. Hosts Pastors Dwight and Joan Fletcher, founding pastors of Transformed Life Church, Reverend Dr. Conway Edwards, also Dr. Rowan Paul Earl, Reverend Che Coleman. They will equip us to meet the changing needs of the communities we serve. Visit accelerate-leader.net or call 876-371-0983. Accelerate Pastors and Leaders Conference, Thursday, October 3 and Friday, October 4. Transformed Life Church.
Happy be a man, got to be a man.
On the next episode of The Mailbox, we focus on the topic Reaching Men, Part 2. When men get serious about their relationship with Jesus, they bring their families with them. How do we attract and develop more of our men to become mentors and leaders in the church? What are some of the success stories of men's ministries in our time? You are invited to join the conversation with Pastor Gilbert Wesley, ministry entrepreneur and pastoral care minister, on Wednesday, September 11 at 5:30 p.m. on the family station, Love 101. The Mailbox is brought to you by Solid PVC Pipes, manufactured in Jamaica by Fosterage Company Limited. The Mailbox, Monday!
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. We are in the First Watch, and Jamaica has given support, it is indicated, to a historic United Nations convention aimed to tackle cybercrime after what has been said to be 3 years of negotiations and a final 2-week session in New York. The United Nations Convention Against Cybercrime, was approved by consensus on the 8th of August this year. Now, the treaty is indicated to be one that will address cybersecurity, which is said to be a growing problem globally. There are urgent warnings that the agreement will permit countries to expand invasive electronic surveillance, as if the surveillance wasn't bad already. There's so much surveillance going on. To expand invasive electronic surveillance in the name of criminal investigations. The new treaty will be enforced once it has been ratified by 40 member nations, but there has been fierce opposition, and I would even say deep concern because of the kind of surveillance it can allow. We have as our guest today to look at this, I would call this a very earth-shattering topic this morning. Rory Ebanks, Director Cyber and Information Security at Simtai Consultants Limited. He's also said to be an ethical hacker, which is an interesting coinage, ethical hacker. We also have online Gordon Ellison, Managing Director of TGE Consulting Limited and International Security Consultant. Mr. Ellison and Mr. Ebanks, good day to you both.
Hi, good morning, Stokeley.
Good morning.
I will not pretend as if I am happy about this treaty. I understand the need for cybersecurity, but my God, there is just so much surveillance already. And if my understanding of what I have seen is correct, it will allow for even more surveillance. Maybe there'll be no privacy. Rory Ebanks, starting with you, sir. Tell us about this treaty, and tell us how you feel about it. If, as a professional in this field, in this space, you're happy with it, not happy with it, do you have any concerns? Educate us, Mr. Ebanks.
All right, sure. So thanks again for inviting me here. And one of the key things when I saw the treaty is that it has been in the works for quite a few years. This isn't the first that they've been trying to approve or ratify it. However, there are some enhancements that are required to ensure that, especially from the privacy perspective, it is highly considered. So one of the main concern that some of the nations are complaining about is that it will invade in privacy. It will also invade in certain human rights based on, so for example, freedom of speech. So how they're currently coining the treaty is that any computer crime or any electronic crime can be used to pretty much prosecute anyone. So a simple example is if someone make a comment, let's say the Prime Minister makes or tweets something and someone responds to it with their opinion against what the Prime Minister says. Based on the loophole, they could potentially be committing a crime. So there has to be some control around that, even in terms of how you access the data. So yes, collecting the data for potential investigation is important. However, how you collect it, how do you notify the end users that you're collecting the data? So for example, when you come to our Jamaica Data Protection Act, you have to opt in. So you have to give consent to process and use those data. So that also has to be considered. However, when you look at the bigger grand scheme of things, it's ensuring that from different countries, different nations, if a cyber crime occurs in a particular state, then the other territories should be able to comply and to assist in that investigation. I am somewhat for the treaty. However, there has to be enhancements, especially when it comes on to the type of data, how you access it. And one of the other interesting part, because you did mention that I'm an ethical hacker. So yes, at Simtai, we are ethical hackers. And a very big concern that we have with this treaty is that it will pretty much flag some of our work that we do. So for example, because we're white hat hackers, we typically go on the internet and identify weaknesses with different organizations and then report it to them. If we do that and there is no contractual agreement in place between us and the organization, even though we're doing good deeds, we could potentially be committing a crime based on the current treaty. So it doesn't have any rules in place to currently protect reporting security incident, because again, the organization could turn around and say, hey, you are attacking us, you're committing a crime, you're using these unethical ways to identify a vulnerability in my network. So there has to be some protection around that, and we can expound on it even some more.
Sir, thank you for indicating those things to us. Again, I'm glad you even mentioned human rights, because yes, I have been concerned about that as well, the human rights implications of a treaty with such with the kind of width and breadth that it has. Gordon Ellison, you're the managing director of a particular company and you are an international security consultant. You are for the treaty? If so, why?
Good morning, listeners online. So I am pro treaty.
And we have radio listeners too, sir.
Yes, and radio listeners.
In fact, most of the listeners are listening by radio.
All
Yeah.
right, good.
Go ahead, Mr.
So I am pro the treaty, but it is important that as a security consultant, or even once you're in the international space, the first thing that you understand is the crimes are always committed by a small percentage of people, and so any treaty, any law that is going to be enacted to help with the security, cyber security of anything, has to have some procedural measures and some strong safeguards. Many times when you speak to security persons, they tend to there's a perception that we are against human rights, that we're against measures that allow us to be intrusive.
Let me make it abundantly clear, Mr. Ellison. At no time on the Morning Watch have we said that the treaty was designed to crack down on human rights.
Oh no, that wasn't said. I'm stating a general conversation.
Making it very clear because you went there.
Yeah. Okay, making a general conversation.
Yes, what I am saying, let me finish. What I am saying is that if the effect of the words, no matter how well intentioned, result in the reduction of privacy or the further erosion of privacy, because it was already being eroded, in my opinion, results in the further erosion of your privacy, as well as the further erosion or the reduction of your human rights. To me, those are non-negotiable. But proceed, Mr. Ellison.
Correct. So this is where now we're going to clarify that, because there's no part of human rights that is non-negotiable. They are not absolute. And this is where security comes in now, because where somebody, just for example, on a sidebar, where somebody takes a life, they have given up certain rights by committing certain crimes. And this is where the conversation is.
That's not what we mean in terms of the human rights framework.
I understand what you're saying.
My view is that we must not do things which have the effect of reducing human rights and then just simply say, well, it's for security. If you keep doing that, then where will it end up? We'll have no human rights at all. But continue, Mr. Ellis.
Correct. So that's exactly the point I'm making, but you're not allowing me to finish.
No.
I'm saying there's a perception.
I have to intervene if I see you're going down a road that might in any way, shape, or form not represent exactly what is being indicated. But continue, Mr. Ellison.
All right. So my one sentence on this opening comment is there's a perception that security is against human rights, because many times the framework that is pushed in to these documents, most persons are looking at the implications.
We are already upon a break, and maybe you can finish that thought on the other side of the break. Listeners, please stay with us. You'll be right back at the Morning Watch. We'll be right back.
Sometimes all we need is a listening ear. The listening ear, the counseling, the logical reasoning, and spiritual guidance are what appeal to us. That's why I'm here. I'm Dr. Joan Pinckney, the counselor, your counselor on Love 101 FM, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, 10 to 11 p.m. Even though you can call on me, I will listen and more. So let's talk about what's bothering you. Anything. Tune in, listen, call in, text or voice message. I'm Dr. Joan Pinckney, counseling psychologist, ready with the listening ear, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, 10 to 11 p.m. Right here on the family station, Love 101 FM.
I am so happy for back to school. Oh wow, getting back to a quiet house comes at a price, right?
Living your best life and making memories is priceless, but saving little by little is what makes it affordable. Stop wishing you could. With your Jane Bank savings, you absolutely can. Jane Bank.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. We are in the first watch. The topic is the United Nations Cyber Crime Treaty. Our guests are Rory E. Banks, ethical hacker, and the Director of Cyber and Information Security at Simtai Consultants Limited, and Gordon Ellison, International Security Consultant and Managing Director of TGE Consulting Limited. Mr. Ellison, before the break, you're making an important point. Would you like to finish the thought? Please, you are looking at the whole matter of security vis-a-vis human rights. Please continue.
Correct. Thank you very much, Stokely. So if I'm allowed to finish, you'll see I'm exactly saying.
Will allow you to finish. You're making that appear as if I wouldn't allow you to finish. Please, you're our guest. Please finish.
Can I go now, Mr. Marshall?
The floor is open.
Thank you. So we are saying the same thing. Security must take into consideration human rights at all costs. But there's a general perception that once you speak security, you can't speak human rights. But there's no security without the respect of human rights, because you're looking, as Mr. Ibanks has said, objectively. There are things that you can do when you're looking at criminal investigations, and this still requires certain procedures, because even the criminal that has committed the most egregious cybercrime has rights that you cannot go into. You need court orders to even do the simplest of invasive hacks or investigation. So we are saying the same thing, that we have to be in pro this treaty. We must ensure that as a country we have the strictest safeguards and the best procedures to ensure that it is ethical, that it is pro-human rights, and that it can stand to scrutiny in the international framework. So that would have been my opening comments.
Thank you very much for that. Now, there has been some criticism. In fact, there is an edition of a newspaper here on the island. I believe it's the Freedom Come Rain newspaper. It pointed out a couple of things. You may agree with what was written or you may not agree, but some of the things pointed out are no privacy of medical, legal data, etc. And that these are just a few of the concerns. There's also a concern expressed generally now, outside of that article even, that you could have the tracking of one's religious and political views. In the opening, Mr. Ibanks, I believe you indicated that, you know, a head of state, head of government could make a statement, and someone in a democracy, as we are, may criticize it, rightfully so, without disparaging, of course, the head of state or head of government. But that comment that might be critical of what was said by the head of state or head of government could be flagged. So, Mr. Ibanks, any thoughts in relation to this? Because It's one thing to need to ensure that there is cybersecurity, but what about these other things, Mr. Evans?
Yeah, so it is a very important topic, especially pertaining to our Data Privacy Act, our GDP. So if you compare the treaty to certain sections of our Jamaica Data Protection Act, it's actually a big contrary, because here in our GDP, we're stating that the user, which is us, have rights to protect our data. We can opt in, we can opt out. We have to consent that you are accessing our data. How are you going to utilize our data? With the international treaty now, it's actually bypassing those requirements, because the end user would not opt in. However, the country or the nation that are subscribing to this treaty would opt in automatically. So again, there has to be some framework control. And you don't want it to be a case where the treaty is now a big contradiction to what the local frameworks are stating. So we have the GDPs, and you can even step back a few years before. So if you're familiar with the GDPR, which is a General Data Protection Regulation, and that was coined in the EU, in Europe. When that came out, it was initially only for particular members of the EU nation. However, it doesn't matter where they traveled. Because if they came to Jamaica, you have to ensure that if they're a customer and their data is on your system, you have to also conform with it. So it's a similar thing where, as the international treaty, if Jamaica is signing up to it, if any Caribbean country is in agreement with it, then they will have to comply with it. What's not clear in the treaty, though, is which one will take precedence. Will our local rules and regulations, especially because we just recently enacted our JDP, Jamaica Data Protection Act, will that take precedence over the international treaty? And I can't answer that question, but it's very contradictory to say that we have a local act and companies are going to follow this act, and users are going to say, yes, my data is protected. I don't want you to use my data in this form. However, if there's some form of investigation, and even that is not clear in the treaty, what comprises of a cybercrime? It could be any act that's utilizing a computer system, an ICT system. It could be that you're on a Wi-Fi and for some reason you scanned a particular device, and then that is a crime. If that is the case, then literally anybody connecting to a Wi-Fi could also fall into that category, depending on how your device is configured. So there has to be some constraints around it.
And would that affect situations where, for whatever reason, well, let me look at another example. There are times, there are some places in Jamaica where the government provides free Wi-Fi. Would that in any way, shape, or form affect what you just said?
There's a strong possibility that it will, because again, with the free Wi-Fi, you don't necessarily have to consent in connecting to the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi is there. You don't have to provide any information. It's just open and free Wi-Fi. From a different perspective, though, there are risks surrounding that from a cybersecurity perspective. Because now, what if a potential attacker, an unethical hacker, connects to that Wi-Fi and then starts scanning and attacking everybody that's on that Wi-Fi? Is that in violation of utilizing the free Wi-Fi? What was in scope pertaining to? From a global perspective, that's a cyber risk or cyber threat. However, is it violating the human rights to say, hey, I need internet. I need to be able to connect on this device and access my email, or to access the website, or to listen to the radio. So there are some loopholes that we have to consider in terms of even from the attacker. And Gordon kind of mentioned it, that even attackers themselves have human rights, and you can't violate those.
There's so much to unpack. I don't even think this segment is long enough to go through everything. But what, if anything, might this treaty in particular, have to do with things that may appear on the surface to be unrelated, but might in fact be related? For example, digital currencies. Any connection between the two, Mr. Ellison? Would you like to try help us there, or there's no connection at all?
No, there is, and Mr. Ibank said it. Once there's an internet, once something happens over any form of connectivity, there is the potential for you to be hacked, your accounts to be depleted, and
Your
all these things.
your bank account in which you might have a CBDC. Jamaica, we already have CBDCs, but it's not widely used.
Right.
So if you have a CBDCs in your account, help us to figure out or to understand the threat that could be posed.
All right. So all the banking platforms now are digital.
Yes.
And that's where cyber crimes come in. And so this treaty is just looking at, we understand the global threat of what's happening and the fact that the world, we're living in an interconnected space now. Most of the crimes that are happening have some form of cyber elements to it, whether it's a telephone conversation, whether it's an internet connection. All mobile phones now are smartphones. And that's also something Rory was, initiating, that everybody now has that level of connectivity, and everybody's data is out there somewhere being stored without their consent. And it is possible for any person to create any crime without the proper laws that will help us to investigate them. We're talking about, you mentioned the digital currencies and bitcoins. That's happening a lot now. Everybody is looking into digital currencies.
Bitcoins as well, and other forms of digital currency. Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're in a digital space which requires connectivity, there is no bounds. This we can't, as you mentioned, 30 minutes is not enough to discuss this, because we haven't even scratched the surface of the global threat.
Yeah.
And other elements that you look at the emerging threats, because we know of the threats that exist, but what are some of the threats that are yet to be that are yet to be realized as a result of the potential of cybercrime? So we have to ensure that this treaty and how we formulate our laws and what takes precedence, you as a Jamaican national or as an international signatory, do we have the necessary cybercrime prevention and response capabilities? Because a law without the capabilities is just something documented to say we're just signing something.
Well, Jamaica is a dualist nation. International treaties are not automatically they don't automatically apply to Jamaica, but more and on that, let us see how that goes, because Mr. Banks, I think you wondered, or you were thinking of, to the extent that some of our provisions here in our local legislation don't match what is in the treaty, which one would prevail. But in terms of what may be a related matter, national sovereignty. Since this is a global treaty in terms of cyber security, do any of you gentlemen see any implications for the national sovereignty of the state, the island of Jamaica? Mr. Ebanks and Mr. Ellison, and we're up there. Mr. Ebanks, any thoughts?
Yeah, so some thoughts on that is it's pretty interesting, because again, one of the core principles of the international law is that we have to ensure that, yes, if we're going to be independent, there are certain rules and regulations that we still have to comply with, especially if we're going to be doing business with certain international nations. So it's only a matter of time for us to adopt some of these principles. And again, it is important for us to be able to track and identify some of these cyber crimes or criminals, because, for example, we're not sure where they originate. We do see a lot of activities in Jamaica. Do we know if it's all local based or if it's overseas? A lot of time we call name to say that, hey, the attack occurred from another territory or another nation. And in terms of doing some of those investigations to identify where it originated from, there are a lot of boundaries that are in place. And if we don't have that sovereignty or that agreement between the other nations, it's going to be difficult for us to investigate.
We have to leave it there this morning. I wanted another comment from you, Mr. Ellison, but alas, we're completely and totally out of time. Mr. Ellison and Mr. Ebanks, thank you so much for your time and for your thoughts. Very, very, very interesting interview. And we hope to have you again to look at this topic and any other related topic. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
All right. Thank you for having us. Bye.
Listeners, please stay with us. We'll be right back on the Morning Watch.
The time by Gem Bank is
7:30.
Ready to experience 6 times more freshness in your clothes? Try Downy Scent Beads. Its fragrance is so amazing, you'll have to sniff it to believe it. Try Downy Scent Beads today. 6 times more freshness versus using detergent alone.
With so much to do in one location, make Mega Mart your one-stop shop. Pick up your groceries and houseware needs, grab a bite and pay some bills, fill your prescriptions and see the beauty products in our pharmacy, all in one amazing location. My Mega Mart, the best value by far.
Remember everything where you have, remember everything where you plan. With J Bank, anything possible. With a little savings in your hand. Save for your plan. Big house, buy the land, walk out and build a plan. Save for your plan.
living your best life and making memories is priceless. But saving little by little is what makes it affordable. Stop wishing you could. With your Gem Bank savings, you absolutely can. Gem Bank, we help you find a way.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. Let's take a look now at the newspapers to see what Jamaicans and others are saying and doing. And we look at the physical copy of the Daily Observer, Corruption Nightmare. Corruption Nightmare. 5 PNP, 3 JLP politicians reported to Integrity Commission for illicit enrichment. And there is another story here, and this one referred to on the front page, but in more detail at page 5 of the Daily Observer. MBJ Limited. MBJ denies request made for US $400 ambulance fee. Many persons might have heard the unfortunate news of a gentleman who is reported to have died at the airport in Montego Bay in a particular set of circumstances. And we turn to Loop Jamaica News. DCP Richard Stewart to head crime and security portfolio. The Jamaica Constabulary Force has announced that Deputy Commissioner of Police, DCP, Richard Stewart will assume responsibility for the crime and security portfolio effective today. We also have in Loop Jamaica News, BOJ lifts paymaster suspension. BOJ lifts paymaster suspension. Remittance services restored. We now turn to the Gleaner. In the Gleaner, we have female killed in hit and run in Spanish Town. And there's another story here. Defendant's application for extension in property dispute denied. Those and many other stories in our news sources. Coming up next, we'll read for some of the feedback in our Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp question, which is, when and how will wars cease? When and how will wars cease? If you haven't done so, leave your responses in our Facebook or YouTube, Love 101 FM Jamaica Live, and also WhatsApp comments and voice notes to 876-9973-125 using the hashtag The Morning Watch. We'll be right back.
Be a man, got to be a man.
On the next episode of The Mailbox, we focus on the men to become mentors and leaders in the church? What are some of the success stories of men's ministries in our time? You are invited to join the conversation with Pastor Gilbert Wesley, ministry entrepreneur and pastoral care minister, on Wednesday, September 11 at 5:30 p.m. on the family station, Love 101. The Mailbox is brought to you by Solid PVC Pipes, manufactured in Jamaica by Fosterage Company Limited. The Mailbox,
It's the third staging of Accelerate Pastors and Leaders Conference, October 3 and 4. Hosts Pastors Dwight and Joan Fletcher, founding pastors of Transformed Life Church, Reverend Dr. Conway Edwards, Apostle Dr. Rowan Paul Earl, Reverend Che Cohen. They will equip us to meet the changing needs of the communities we serve. Visit accelerate.leader.net or call 876-371-0983. Accelerate Pastors and Leaders Conference, Thursday, October 3 and Friday, October 4. Transformed Life Church.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. Let's join Chakal for a look at how our Facebook and WhatsApp friends answer today's question. When and how will wars cease? Chakal.
All right, so we have a response here from Cherry in Spanish Town. Cherry says, when will war cease? Interesting question. War will cease, as many would say, when Jesus Christ comes.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. If I could use a little Jamaican language, it done right. That's all.
That's it done. That's it.
That is it. That is it.
That
That
is
is it. That is it. That is it. Welcome back to the Morning Watch. The world is currently experiencing a record number of conflicts and crises since the end of World War II. In our cause, the little Western third world lives. Well, I hate that term, third world. Anyway. I hate that phrase, third world. Anyway, many of us probably have no idea what a catastrophic humanitarian crisis going on in other parts of the world is like. We talk about war in Jamaica sometimes, but sometimes when you talk about war in Jamaica, we mean some shooting taking place somewhere, and that is bad. That is very bad. But you have some countries in the world, when they are talking about war, they're talking about what you could call real war. Fighting in Sudan, Gaza, wider Middle East war, Sudan, Ukraine, Myanmar, Ethiopia, Haiti, Armenia, Azerbaijan, US, China. Well, I won't go into that at the moment. In 2024, up to 300 million people, it is said, will need humanitarian aid. We have as guests this morning to look at this matter of wars and rumors of wars and how many wars there are and how can we not have all these wars. We have Pastor Silburn Carr, pastor of the Abundant Life Christian Church, and Reverend Dr. Ralston Nemard, Anglican priest, columnist, and author. Reverend Nemard, Pastor Carr, good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, and to your listeners and to our fellow guests.
And I'm glad that you are not on as a retired Anglican priest, Reverend Nemard.
No, you never get retired. You may get a bit tired, but never retired. Unless you're retiring. When you patch tires.
Gentlemen, we're about this topic, having a little light moment. But war is a serious matter.
Yes.
People die, people get injured. Have you ever seen someone who is a victim of war, limbs lost, brain injury, memory loss? So some soldiers, when they come back from war, they're not the same as when they went to the war. They're not the same. They have all kinds of shock they went through, etc. They see people literally being blown apart in front of them, and they see this constantly. So with the various conflicts and crises, should we be watching even now in 2024? What are some of these conflicts and crises that we should be seeing or watching? Gentlemen, let me start with you, Reverend Nemard.
Well, there are quite a bit of them that is taking place right now. But let me just back up and undergird what you're saying there about the effects that wars are having, and I think of the children in Gaza. Can you imagine when you hear a little firecracker, you jump as a child? Can you imagine 2,000-pound bombs dropping around you? But that's another thing, the whole psychological effect of that. But I think the main war that is taking place right now that we need to be very concerned about is what is happening in Israel, in the Middle East. That has always been a place for conflicts from as long as we can think back. And then the eruption of that situation in Ukraine with Russia. And I say especially the war in Gaza, because in the Middle East, it's no longer just Gaza. It's emerging into a regional conflict. And the concern that I have there is that it can emerge into a wider conflict that pulls in other nations. And you could very well have the makings of a third world war on your hands. So that particular situation, I think, is more worrying than perhaps right now the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, though that too has the possibility of pulling in other world powers, like China and so on.
We are a little bit, I guess, because of Hollywood and we tend, and what we have actually seen in reality too. We are accustomed to hearing of wars and conflict thousands of miles away. So it's usually in the Middle East. It's somewhere in Africa. It's somewhere very much further afield. It's not normally on the soil of a Caribbean territory or on the soil of Canada or the USA. And what is the status of these wars today that we're talking about, and where are they headed? Because I think we might begin to look at them a little bit differently if we see the winds of those wars blowing west. Reverend Nemard, I'm going to bring in Pastor Carr. Reverend Nemard, any comments or responses?
Inevitably, if you have a war that has the makings of a worldwide conflict, other nations are going to be pulled in. And that is why the conflict in the Middle East right now and the nature of it and what is emerging into a wider situation there will inevitably pull in countries in the West. And so when that happens, you can expect that you're going to have a more dangerous situation in the world, especially when you see the tendency towards autocracy that is taking place. What I find very worrying is the growing alliance between China, Russia, and even North Korea. But not just them, but there seems to be a coalition of autocratic governments that are coming together to fuel these wars and to fuel conflict around the world. They're inserting themselves, Russia and China, for example, especially Russia, not openly, but I think in a very clandestine way, inserting themselves into these wars that are taking place, like in the Middle East and so on. We don't hear of it, but they're trying to influence those situations as well. And so the possibility of the West, the bottom line I'm saying is that the possibility of the West being pulled into these conflicts as they escalate is very, very worrying, and it's something that the world has to pay attention to, I think.
Well, Pastor Carr, the conflicts and the crises to watch in 2024, what is left of the year, and where might these wars be headed? Before we head to the break, Pastor Carr.
I have to go back to St. Matthew 24, where the disciples came to Jesus and asked him, what will be sign at the end time? And he spoke of these things, war, rumors of war, nation fight against nation. And all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So what we are seeing is something that is expected, it is prophesied. It will happen because of the nature of man. Man is very possessive, and man will fight about land. The thing is about land, you know. All these wars about land, you know. And it will not end. When will it end?
And well,
Armageddon. It's going to end us all. So all that we're talking about, we can't prevent them, you know. We have to just ask God to preserve us and preserve the innocent from the destruction.
Pastor Carr, Reverend Nemard, hold those thoughts for one moment. We're upon a break. Listeners, please stay with us. We'll be right back at the Morning Watch.
Chris sardine for the chef and the beginner. Follow the one with pepper, that are the winner. Shop on supermarkets, everybody
Chris
say
sardines follow the better flavor.
The time is 7:45.
report if you don't check early. The excellent customer service, our staff is knowledgeable and trustworthy. And we have a wide variety of supplies, society, and the price is right, yes, it's worth it. The solution to your auto parts means the one-stop shop. And we deliver to some if you can't come in, just ring the power stop. Or call and make your order, and remember there's no other. So it hurts if you don't check early. So there's no need to say. Report if you don't check early.
What is a credit card? A credit card is far more than a piece of plastic. A credit card is a loan which is tied to your account at a financial institution. Remember, you still have to pay back the institution on time for any transactions. It's not your money. You have to pay it back or your credit profile will suffer. If you don't pay it back in full, interest will be charged on any outstanding amount. If you don't pay in full, interest will be charged on any outstanding amount.
This financial literacy tip was brought to you by Bank of Jamaica, building an inclusive economy. Once upon a time, there's a girl named Kay. She loved to dance and play. One day at school, she got ill, and Mom was left with an unbearable bill. It would be easier if Mom was prepared. With School Companion, 80% of the bill is cleared. Medical care for children is a must. For as low as $2,540 per month, make unbearable medical bills go away. Sign up for Surgical School Companion today. Conditions apply.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. We are in the second watch, and we're having a conversation with Pastor Silburn Carr and Reverend Dr. Ralston Nemard. The topic is wars and rumors of wars. Just before the break, Pastor Silburn Carr, you are responding to questions: what conflicts and crises should we be watching even now in 2024, as well as what is the status of these wars today and where are they headed? Please continue, Pastor Carr. In fact, you mentioned that these wars will end at Armageddon. Continue, sir. Pastor Carr? Maybe, well, Pastor Carr, I think you're here. Yes, Pastor Carr? Trying to hear you, Pastor Carr. Reverend Nemard, are you with us? Reverend Nemard?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, excellent. Trying to have Pastor Carr back on the line to finish his response. Pastor Carr, can we hear you now? Well, we will try to have Pastor Carr back on. I'm not too sure what has happened. Now, how do we relate to the signs of the times? When I speak about the signs of the times, I am looking in particular at, just even the scripture that Pastor Carr mentioned before the break, in terms of there'll be wars and rumors of, well, in terms of, it is a sign of the end coming. I gather that maybe Pastor Carr might be back online. Pastor Carr, are you back with us?
Yes, I'm back.
Excellent. Would you like to finish your thought that you were sharing just before the break, sir?
I was just saying that there's very little man can do to prevent these wars. Because of the nature of man, man is very selfish. And the Bible says, hell and destruction is never full, so the eyes of man is never satisfied. So man is always trying to get more territory, more land, more power. It's the nature of man, the nature of the Adamic man to pursue wars. And it's not going to end. It's not going to end until the final battle.
I'm going to interject for a moment, only because, in international law, you're not supposed to fight anymore in terms of seeking conquest. The rules of international war or international conflict, I'll use the word conflict. The rules of international conflict are such where you're not supposed to be fighting for territory or to conquer another place. So it's interesting that you mentioned that they're fighting for land. Why do you say that, sir?
Why do I say they're fighting for land?
Yeah.
But look, Ukraine is land, Gaza is land. I think Sudan is the same thing. Most of the war is about land, you know. Conquest, land, wealth, power. It's boiled back down to all those things. So I don't think it's going to end, you know. It's not going to end now, you know. It's going to continue. It's an end time phenomenon.
Yeah.
And the Bible speak about truce breakers. So when they make a peace treaty, it's not going to last so long. So we have to pray during this time for God to preserve us from destruction from these wars. That's what we have to pray for.
You see, when there's international conflict now, it should only be because what you're doing is justifiable, but that's probably another discussion. Reverend Dr. Nemard, in terms of why haven't we resolved some of these conflicts, any thoughts?
Oh, well, like Pastor Carr is saying, it's not easy to resolve these conflicts, you know. War has been a part of the human experience ever since Cain killed his brother Abel. You know, and so there's gonna be war and war and war. And what you see, the way that the world is moving and the sophistication of the weaponry of war that we have today, you know, it is so insane that we should be building this kind of arsenal, world arsenal. To what end? It has to be, you know, I mean, we have enough nuclear weapons, for example, right now, that can wipe off every single person on planet Earth. In I would say, in my layman judgment, under half an hour. I know it will happen, can happen quicker than that. And to what end? As Pastor Carr is saying, it's a lust for power. It is a need, a desire for other people's property, land. And that has been at the very center of the war in the Middle East, ever since Israel believed that they were given this land of milk and honey by God. And they think that it is theirs and nobody else should occupy it.
So
it is what it has always been about.
So, Reverend Emad, you don't believe it was given to them by God? I'm asking.
Well, when they went down there and they realized that there were other people living there, they had to fight, and you had a period of fighting and conquest, a period of where they had to establish themselves in the land. Yes, God was with them in their in the fights, like we know with Joshua and all the others. But to think that they were just going to go down there and God had this piece of land ready for them, and they could just occupy without having to establish themselves in the land. I mean, they realized that that could not happen. Let me just quickly say, you know, former Prime Minister Golda Meir, she had a very interesting statement in Parliament, in the Knesset one day. She said, if God was going to give us this land, he might have given us the section that had oil on it. Right? Because look at all the other Arab countries around. They all have oil. Israel is surrounded by Arab countries, and yet Israel itself, probably the milk and honey of which they thought, they never had. I'm just being a little, you know, but I'm just, what I'm saying is that this whole idea that you can just have control of other people's lives and property because you think you have a kind of divine right to it, in a way, it needs to be re-examined.
So, Reverend Nemand, you do not think that they have a divine right to the land? I'm deliberately asking the question.
Yeah, it's a bit more complicated than a one sentence answer, you know, to that sort of thing. But what I find is that what I know that God intended for Israel is that there should be a light to the nations.
Yes.
And they failed in that significant mission, and instead they went down there and were overtaken by greed to the extent that they expelled the Palestinians who were living in the land and who were their first cousins coming from the line of Ishmael. And until they can recognize
Isn't
that
that
they
where
are
the,
true
isn't that
brothers
where
coming from the stock of Abraham,
yeah.
you'll never have peace down there.
And isn't that where the story all began? Isaac and Ishmael.
Yeah.
Yes, that's where it's at.
Mm.
And they can never come face to face and confront that reality that they are blood relatives, and that what they think that God intended for them, that they should command the land and hold it for themselves and chase out others and bomb to smithereens so many children in Gaza. That's not God's will.
Mm. Mm.
And they need to hear that. Netanyahu needs to hear that.
Pastor Carr, I don't know what your thoughts are on the matter. And by the way, for those listeners who would have
based on the scripture in Genesis that they were given a certain piece of land.
Yeah.
However, I believe that if you are God's representative, you are God's people, you have to conduct yourself in a way that shows love and compassion.
That is godly. Yeah.
Israel hasn't. I'm saying that the children in Gaza were created by God too.
Yeah.
They are God's people as well. And don't treat them less than because you believe you have a divine right. There's a way to conduct yourself. Recently, they had to ask for time off for the children to get polio vaccine.
Yeah.
I mean, we're getting crazy. We're getting power drunk, and we're getting so almost insane when blood is lost. That can like to kill a cat. 40,000 people dead, and I'm not saying that all the people are innocent people, but innocent have died as well.
Too many of them.
All right, 1,200 innocent Jews were killed, but maybe 30,000 innocent Palestinians. It does not compute. There's no way to call it no. There's no just equity in terms of the life lost. Both sides are vowing to destroy the other side. Or you going to get peace in that? You can't get the peace.
I hold no brief for either of the countries, or either side, I should say, rather.
Yeah, man. Either side are bloodthirsty.
Many people refer to the story of King David. I've heard it in many sermons. And they talk about David as being a man of God's own heart. But yet there are so many things that we would have read about that he did that were absolutely wrong. So we don't seem to apply that barometer to the current situation between Israel and Gaza. We seem to assume that Israel must be sort of perfect. But
no, Israel is not perfect. They're not perfect.
Many of those Bible passages that we read, the Israelites were not perfect. So they're part of Reverend Nemard.
Yeah, yes, and they think.
Can I interject just before?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a scripture in Revelation that says that there are those that say that they are Jews, but they are not. They are the synagogue of Satan. I wonder who God is referring to in this scripture. Is these the Jews in Israel now? Are those the ones he's referring to? Sometimes you wonder.
Interesting.
And you know, Israel as a nation has never carried out the will of God that was intended by God for them. When they talk about Israel as a chosen nation or a special people, they have never really carried out the will of God, even to this day. As a matter of fact, what they're doing down there in the Middle East is a violation of the will of God.
Only because of time, gentlemen. We are literally out of time. We just cannot continue.
Yeah, we need an hour for this.
Very interesting.
More time.
Because we are completely Pastor Silver and Reverend Dr. Ralston Nemard. I want to thank both of you gentlemen for being with us in this second watch. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you too. God
My
bless.
pleasure. You have a good day, both of you. Thanks.
And thank you, listeners, for being with us. Join us again tomorrow as we look at other topical and controversial issues. Visit the Love 101 FM YouTube channel and Facebook page for this and all other Love 101 FM programs. Listen to the Morning Watch on our Love 101 app and download it today and stay connected to the family station, Love 101 FM, the #1 gospel station in Jamaica. This has been the Morning Watch. Thanks to our producer, Kathy Gale, and to our guests. I am Stokeley Marshall, handing you back to Love in the Morning with Jakal.
We want to thank the Accelerate Conference for sponsoring the Morning Watch for today.